Thank you. Well, I'm really excited to be here with you all today. I love college. I like to think I'm still as old as a college student, even though I'm getting closer to probably the age of your mothers at this point. But I used to teach at the college level, and it's always been one of my favorite things to do. So I wanted to talk to you today about creating your life. So the piece that I put up here at first is one of my mixed media pieces. So one of the series I like to work in, I actually work in a lot of series as an artist, is I do bookshelves. So I do these mixed media pieces with all of these volumes of books. Because for me, I like to explore the way that each of our sort of stories and the narratives of our lives sort of come together in really interesting ways. Your story will be very different from my story, but when we put those all together, we get something that's really interesting. And not only that, but it's a great metaphor for our lives individually. Our lives aren't made up of just one thing. They're made up of lots of different things, lots of chapters, lots of volumes, lots of interests, lots of experiences, and when you put those together is really where you find the richness of your life. So for me, you'll get to see some of my artwork sort of trailing through this. Those of you who are coming to Art Talks tonight will get to see more of it and in more detail. So recently I was in New York because I was featured in this book called Their Roaring 30s that Forbes put out. And they sort of interviewed women in their 30s and said, kind of, what are the secrets of your success? And so for me, I said, well, at some point along the way, I realized that what you want to be when you grow up doesn't have to be a one-word answer. So let me take you back to the time when I was a senior in high school, and I had to pick a major for college. And I thought, there are so many things I love to do. Like, I already know that there's things I really like. So I really like science and medicine, but I wasn't really sure I wanted to be a doctor or a nurse. And I really liked children, and I liked education. I loved teaching. And I really liked art and creativity. And I really liked psychology and relationships, and I really liked world civilizations and cultures. Now, as you can imagine, with these 5 very diverse sets of interests, I could not seem to comprehend a major or a job that would allow me to do all of the things that I wanted to do. So I finally sort of picked something. I picked education because I thought, well, at least if I'm a teacher, I can sort of dabble in a lot of these other things and kind of still keep them current along the way. But this sort of over time, somewhere in that period between 17 and 38 where I am now, I realized I could do multiple things. And not just, how some people talk about they had one career and then they leave it and have another career, but know that I could do multiple things like simultaneously along the way. And when I did that, I was happy because I didn't feel like I had caged up parts of my personality. But instead I was activating all of these interests, all of these passions, all of these things I loved. And it made me so much more energetic, it made me happier, and I was always hungry to do the next thing. If I was spending time working on lectures for a college course, I was so excited to paint later that day. Or if I was painting, I may be so excited to start packing up for a medical mission and gathering all the toys I need for a hospital. But in doing this, I also realized it gave me strengths that other people didn't have in any one of those professions because they'd taken kind of a different course, and we all bring to it a lot of skills in different things. So it gave me an advantage that other people didn't necessarily have because I brought in skills from these very different areas. So in developing these things, hopefully you'll realize that it's okay to want to be more than one thing. And while you have to kind of pick paths and eventually pursue things, this is not to throw all advising to the wind and say, do everything. But to realize that there's ways that you can weave those things into your life and have them be enjoyable for you. So I'll talk a little bit about being an artist, because being an artist is one thing I absolutely love doing. I loved art since I was a child. I was a little girl, and I would sit at my kitchen table with my little Crayola watercolors and paint these beautiful fields of flowers and enter them in my school reflections contest and get the little ribbon, and I felt so special. But I sort of then decided I wanted to pursue art more. And let me tell you one other thing about art that's really great, which is being an artist. You should all be artists, and this is why. I was telling my secrets earlier. Because when you are an artist, you can wear weird clothes, and people say, oh, she's an artist. And if you're kind of quirky or you forget things or you're occasionally flaky at times, people say, oh, she's an artist. And it's kind of like, or you do something and people don't generally question you, kind of like, it's like this emperor's new clothes syndrome, where they're kind of afraid to point it out for fear they're missing some part of the artistic genius in it, and so they just keep their mouths shut. And so instead of being really negative and critical, everyone is like really supportive and like, oh, she's an artist, and they think there's all this genius going on inside of you. So I'm telling you, it's like my secret, but you might want to embrace art before it's too late, because as long as you can give yourself that artist label, like you have bought yourself a lot of latitude in life. So, and you can pick any of the arts, but just always, I'm an artist, and you'll save yourself a lot. So I love art not just because of the things you produce in art, but I love art because of the things that it teaches you and the way that it teaches you to think. So I'll take you back to one of my painful stories in my early days of art. So we moved to Illinois from Turkey, where we had lived for a few years when I was in the end of elementary school and junior high. And so I decided I'm going to take art to the next level, and I sign up for this art class at the St. Louis Art Museum. And I'm really excited about this. I get my pencils, I get my sketchbook, all these things that it says I need on my supply list. And it's Saturday morning, and my mom gets up, and we drive to Forest Park, and we drive to the museum, and I check in at the desk, and they tell me to go stand by the fountain where I have to stand with the other 12-year-olds who feel horribly awkward, and we're all staring at the ceiling or floor trying to act like you don't see the person standing right next to you, because you're still kind of afraid to talk to them because you don't know them at all. And you're just standing there with your sketchbook. Sorry, I've been talking a lot, and I will be talking more, so I'm going to drink. So I'm standing there awkwardly waiting for the class to start. So finally the teacher comes and she tells us, oh, I'm so excited you're all here. There's so many treasures in this museum. We're going to go explore. So I'm like, this is going to be great. Like, this is going to be so much fun. So she takes us and we follow after her as this band of sort of like awkward adolescent ducklings through this gallery. And she takes us to the ancient art gallery. So for any of you who've spent much time around art, ancient art tends to be like Greek and Roman sculptures. So you have these like marble torsos of these like Adonis and Aphrodite, unclad, semi-clad, often sans fig leaf, these sculptures sitting here in the gallery. So she takes us in, and I'm thinking, this is not what I was prepared for in this class. And she has us all sit down on the floor, and she starts talking about the piece, and then she says, okay, I want you to draw this sculpture. And I look up, and it is this, marble Adonis. And I'm thinking, I don't even have the same parts that this figure has. I don't know how to draw this. I can draw flowers, I can draw a parrot, but I cannot draw the human figure. Like, you've got to be kidding me. I am 12 years old. This is hard. And any of you who have ever tried to draw the human figure know it is incredibly complex, because the human figure is just made up of concave and convex and all of these overlapping parabolic shapes, that it is bone and muscles and sinews and tendons and fat and all of these things, and it is really, really hard to draw. Don't let that scare you, though, from continuing to do figure drawing. But it's hard for me now as a professional artist. So I was thinking, this is not going to be good. And I'm sitting here, and so, I try to like open my sketchbook as slowly as possible. Like, I'm trying to kill time, thinking like fumbling with my pencils, but like, this is going to go on for 2 hours. Like a blank sketchbook, it can't take that long to open to a page in a blank sketchbook. Like, oh, where's a page I can use? So I get my eraser out, because I know an eraser is going to be a critical tool in this venture today. And I start to draw. And then I also realize, I am sitting with other people who can see my very terrible attempts at drawing. So I try to sit there with my arm hiding my sketchbook as I'm also trying to draw at the same time so no one can see it. And what you have to realize is it's not just the other 12-year-olds that are in my class that can see my drawing. It is every person who is visiting the museum that day, walking through the gallery, can look down and see this novice attempt that I am doing. And so I draw, and I come up with this really good idea. I'm like, you know what? If I draw this in the absolute lightest gray lines that you can possibly make on a piece of paper, then my mistakes won't show up very well because no one can really see it that well enough to know, and they're really easy to erase. So I draw like as light as is humanly possible on this drawing. And so I'm thinking, like, this is pretty painful. Like, this has to end soon. Like, please, like, the class will come to an end. This is one of the worst moments of my life. And then the teacher says, great, 5 more minutes, finish up, then we're going to have critique. So I think, great, we're moving on to something else. I've survived. No, I did not understand what critique meant at this time. So she says, okay, take your drawings and line them up here along this bench, and we're going to talk about each one of them. And I think, oh no, like, my parents paid good money for this. Like, this is not okay. Why are you doing this to 12-year-olds? Like, nothing is more painful than this. And there is no, like, back row. There's no hiding. It is, like, right there across this bench in the middle of the museum gallery. So it is this terrible lineup. It's like a bad police lineup. There are like little tiny, like badly proportioned ones. There are ones that are going off the page. There's ones that look like somebody vomited charcoal on them. They're just, and there's my little, light gray one up there, hoping it won't get noticed. And the teacher explains what critique is. And she says, critique is where we talk about what's working really well in your piece. And we also talk about things that, need improvement, which is the really nice way of saying, like, what is not working at all and is terrible in your piece, which of course, the first part sounds great. Someone's going to give me a compliment. And the second part, you're like, can we just skip that when we get to my piece? Let's just mention the good parts and move on. So they're all lined up here. And she starts going down the line like, oh, great mark making and, really courageous strokes. There's a lot of expression in it, all these nice things that we say in art to describe things. And then I can feel it like getting closer to me, like your face is like flushed and you're like sweating, like your blood pressure is like, please, just skip mine. And it's going down the line and she gets to mine and she says, like great use of space, but don't be afraid to get in there with the darks. Like, you really need contrast to have form in art. And I thought about that, and then I was like, okay, I have survived. I have survived my first art critique. And I figured at this point, my parents probably could not get a refund on the class. So I was stuck with it. And I realized, too, that the other people who had been in this class with me who had endured similar torture would probably keep their mouths shut because we had all gone through this experience together. And so it was kind of one of those, like, we're in this together, but we're not going to say anything about anyone else's work once we leave this room. And I realized that, of all the people that were at the St. Louis Art Museum this day, they were there to see great, masterful works of art, and hopefully my drawing would not be one of the things that they remembered that day. But this experience for me was a really meaningful one. And so I learned some incredible lessons on that day and from that experience at 12 years old that really began shaping my life. So I'm going to talk to you about some of those lessons. So these are my lessons from Adonis and Aphrodite that day, which was I learned courage and bravery. I learned to do something that was hard and painful, not necessarily because I chose to at that moment, but because I had to. But it taught me to choose to more often in life because good things came from that. It taught me how to be vulnerable, to open myself up to the inspection of other people. And it taught me how to defend my ideas and my choices and the things that I did, which is one of the great skills that you learn in art. And it taught me about the necessity of contrast, and not just about contrast in art, but the necessity of contrast in life, that without lights and darks, without easy and hard, and all of these things, life didn't have much form. It was pretty flat. And as hard as that was for me to appreciate at the time, it taught me so much. And I realized that doing things you're not naturally good at are the places that you grow the most. It's easy to do things you're kind of already good at. But those places you're not very good at, that's where you learn a lot. And critique makes you better. At that point in my life, I didn't want to hear what I didn't do well. I was afraid of those things, and I tried to hide those things. Instead of realizing, you know what, when somebody shows you a way you can improve, it's not to like tear you down, it's because it makes you better. And I learned to not be afraid of that, because obviously there was something I didn't know how to do or couldn't see, or I wouldn't have done that in the first place. So art also teaches some other really great lessons. So art is not so much about right and wrong, and this is what I love about art. Like, if you were to talk about math, and like you were a balloon and math is like a wall of nails if it comes to like right and wrong. And if it's art, it's like a wall of furry blankets. Like, there isn't a lot of right and wrong. So that's one of the really cool things about art. And while you can judge it through a lot of aesthetic lenses, there's different lenses we can put on that let us value it in different ways. So, and in English, many of you probably read the Robert Frost poem about two roads diverged in a yellow wood. Sorry, I cannot trouble. If you know this poem, like, just nod for me, like somebody's heard it. Okay. And art, I was like, you know what? Robert Frost had it all wrong. There are not two roads. There are like 764,000 roads. Really, I could say infinity, but that's like cheating, because like when you're on the playground and somebody says, well, like art has infinity, and then there's no comeback after that. So there are lots and lots of roads in art. And it's about unique combinations. It's about exploring. It's about all these different permutations and combinations, and it never gets tapped out. There is an endless, like, natural resources in the world. We may run out of everything else, but we'll never run out of ideas in art, because there's always new beauty, there's always new experience. Like, the world is changing constantly, and you can make meaning from those experiences. So art is very forgiving. It is the land of erasers. It is the land of painting over things and fresh paper and blank canvases. And it teaches you that in life you can start over, you can change, you can fix, and endings. You know, everyone always says, how do you know when a painting's done? And I'm like, I don't know when a painting's done. I look at it for a while and I decide, maybe it's done, maybe it's not done, maybe I come back to it in 6 months, maybe I come back to it in a year. But ends aren't as finite as we often think that they are. It's also a place of self-awareness. When you say you're an artist, people think like you have these visions, and this idea, like fully formed, sort of like instills in your brain and then like shoots out your fingertips onto the canvas in just this magnificent way, and it's not that way at all. It comes in your mind in these like nebulous thoughts and ideas that sort of pester you, and it's sort of like dreams. Like, it doesn't all make sense, and you can't really like see it all very clearly, but you kind of take that and you sort of try to make meaning and give it form and like play with it and move it around until you can create something really meaningful from it. So it builds a lot of self-awareness in you. The other thing is, creativity is really about exploring. And that is a great thing. Like, you can go deep, you can go broad. So the example I put up here is an example of going deep. So as you heard, I studied human development in graduate school, and I was really intrigued by relationships. I'm intrigued by women, by their lives, and so I wanted to do a series depicting domestic work. So I painted 30 paintings that were 30 by 40, so a good size, of women without heads, which is always fun when you go to a party and people say, what do you paint? I'm like, women without heads doing domestic work. But it sounds more violent than it actually is. But, and so I painted these 30 paintings because I wanted people to walk through this experience and go, oh, like, I can relate to that, and really get a sense of that. So in art, it's really cool because you can go deep, and you can take an idea and you can explore and explore and explore it. And at the same time, there's days when I get up and I go into my studio and I go, I want to paint something that looks like I didn't paint it, that doesn't look like anything I've ever created before. And those lateral moves are as important as linear moves, which is something that art taught me. And so I play this game with myself to see like how many different ways I can paint sometimes, because it's just really fun to see what I can come up with. So art teaches us lots of things, but that's just one of the places that I learned lots of great lessons in life from. Other lessons I learned from child life. So you may say, like, what is child life? I've never heard of this. For me, child life is a clinical specialty. So you work in a hospital setting, and you're responsible for all the psychological, social, and emotional needs of children in hospitals. So you run the hospital teen room, you run the hospital playroom, you prepare patients for surgery, you basically help eliminate the stresses for patients when they're in the hospital. So for me, I didn't even know child life existed till after I graduated from college. I was teaching school in Virginia, and I said, I have some extra time. You know, my love of science and medicine need was still there, and it wasn't fulfilled. So I said, I'm gonna go volunteer at a hospital. And when I did, I found the field of child life. And I realized this is a great place for me because it lets me incorporate creativity, it lets me incorporate children and relationships and psychology and science and medicine. And I was like, this is a great thing. So in graduate school, I studied human development, and then I went on to Johns Hopkins, where I did clinical training as a child life specialist, and I trained under like amazing pioneers in the field. And it was a wonderful experience. So now I've worked, at various times I've worked inpatient clinical settings as a child life specialist. But also, what it's opened up the door for me to do is to go on medical missions around the world, which again, remember I loved civilizations and cultures, and I'm like, wow, really? Like, you want to send me around the world? Like, I'll totally go to India. You want me to go to Nepal? Sure. Jordan, Kenya, Siberia, Morocco, the Philippines. I get to go to those places, and I get to work with people, and I get to do all of these amazing things. So most of the time when I go with Operation Smile that does cleft lip and cleft palate repairs for children in developing countries. So you'll see the boy at the bottom has a cleft lip, which means he was born that way, and there's not a fusion of those parts of the lip. So a lot of the underlying bone structure, too, is missing, so it kind of makes your nose misshapen, and it can really affect your teeth, and of course, it's a little off-putting, and children who have that are often, it's hard enough getting through life with a very typical appearance, but when you don't have a typical appearance, people aren't very kind to you. And it's actually a very simple surgery. It takes about an hour. It's not very expensive, but for many people in other countries, getting that surgery done isn't an available opportunity for them. It's too financially prohibitive, or there aren't people around that can do the surgery. So I get to go, and usually in a week we do about 100 surgeries. And it's a very rewarding experience for me. So this is a picture of me with some of the patients sitting on the floor of my makeshift hospital playroom in Nepal, and another one is a young man I worked with in India. But there are wonderful things about this profession that I love. And one of the things, and this is where you should all be a child life specialist too, because it teaches you incredible things, and you think, how did I ever live life? How does everyone live life without these skills and things? And one of them is the underlying principle of child life is, in life we experience stress. So if a child is in the hospital, they're going to experience stress because they're not at home, they have pain, they have restrictions, they have all these things. And so they need a way to cope with that. Well, all of you have stresses in your life, and you need ways to cope with that. So what child life does is it teaches you how to more actively identify those stressors and how to cope with everything in life better, because you get really good at saying, well, it's not just this general stress, I don't know what to do, but you learn to hone in on it and then say, do I need social support? Do I need preparation? Do I need any of these? Do I need therapeutic activities? What's going to help me get through this? One of the other great things is you do psychological preparation. So before something's going to happen for a child, like a surgery, my job is to explain to them what's going to happen. This is the mask you're going to breathe in and out. It gives you medicine that helps you go to sleep. It's different than when you sleep at night. You're not going to wake up in the middle of it, but it'll make it so you don't feel anything while you're having the surgery. And this is the IV, and they're going to put it in after you go to sleep, so your body can have a drink while you're sleeping, because you can't drink through your mouth, but it's a little straw, and it goes into your vein, and it gives you the liquids you need. So you explain these things in a way that children can understand, and then it's much easier for them to cope. You can imagine what it would be like if someone just took you to a hospital and you didn't know what was going on, and no one would tell you, because they said, if I tell you, you're just going to get nervous. Well, then your anxiety gets greater and greater. People always say, don't tell kids when they're going to get a shot, because then they'll get scared. And you go, no, it would be more scary, because they don't know if you're giving them 1, if you're giving them 10, what else you're going to do to them. But if you explain things, if you explain to a patient before surgery what's going to happen, they actually recover faster from surgery. They go home from the hospital faster. Their blood pressure goes back to normal faster. And they trust you. They understand what's going to happen. And this is an applicable concept for adults, and not just for things like that. It's I'm going to a new school. What's it going to be like? What's it going to feel like? How long is it going to take? All those things that if we learn the skills of preparing ourselves for things before they happen, we're much more successful in encountering them. And it teaches you how to deal with grief and loss, because one of the things that child life specialists do is we help children who have death or have death upcoming in their own experience, and also loss. Loss is not just about people dying. We all have loss in our lives. Sometimes it's friendships or relationships that go away. Sometimes it's things with our physical body that we lose the ability to do certain things. Sometimes it's things we really, really hoped for in life that just don't turn out the way that we thought they would. And this experience happened for me. I had my first child, so I have 3 sons. They're very fun. And I'll tell you a little bit about them because they are an important part of my life. So my oldest, he is 13. He is a freshman in high school. His name is Bennett. And he loves science and wants to be a biological engineer because he loves genetics and animals and creatures and is determined to make some amazing things in the world. My second son, North, he's 9. He has decided he wants to be a dermatologist. He wrote an essay about this in 2nd grade. And the school counselor said, North, this is a really unusual choice. Do you have a relative who's a dermatologist? And he said, no. And she kept asking questions, and he was not putting forth why he wanted to be a dermatologist. So I asked him later, and he said, well, it's because you get to zap people with lasers, and someone will pay you for it. So I have some interesting, and then my third son, actually 2 days ago, we're driving to tennis and swim lessons, and he says, Mom, I think I figured it out. I think I know what I want to be. And I was like, great, because we have a lot of discussions about what you love and what you want to do. And he goes, I thought about bus driver and principal. And my other son's like, no, don't go for those. And he goes like, but I have the strongest feelings about chemistry. He's like, I think I can really help the world. He's like, I can make colognes and perfumes. And I was like, okay. So he's really determined that he will aid humanity in this way. So, and my husband's a mechanical engineer, and I love him too. But I had my first son, and so I was like, great, this was fun. I love being a mom. I want more kids. But instead of having a second child at that time, I had 7 miscarriages in 3 years. And it was not a fun experience. 1, I had never comprehended that experience from my life. And 2, I maybe knew someone that had 1 or 2, but like 7 really. So I would be sick and pregnant and then not pregnant and sad and then going to a million doctor's appointments because no one could figure out what this great mystery was, why I couldn't have children, why I couldn't stay pregnant. And it was a really, really, really hard time. But I was so glad that I was a child life specialist because I would say, okay, what is it that I need today? I need information. I need to feel like I'm doing something. And it taught me how to cope and how to be generative, even during a time that was really hard for me in my life. And it also teaches you empathy. It teaches you to take perspective of other people. It teaches you to engage with their experiences. So for me, I have to go into a room and I have to imagine what is it like to be a parent when your child was just diagnosed with a brain tumor? Or what is it like to be a 13-year-old who was just diagnosed with diabetes? Or what is it like to be a patient who's 15, who's back in the hospital for like the 4th time this season with complications because he has cystic fibrosis? What does it feel like? What are the obvious things, but what are the things that nobody wants to talk about? And what are the things that are really real in your life? And I love that I get to have those kind of up-close interactions with people in their lives. And on one of my medical missions, I was in the Philippines, and I always go to visit my patients after I'm like preparing people all day. I run the hospital playroom. We have a great time because, of course, no one's eating or drinking before surgery. And having many, many children who are very hungry and waiting is not very fun, so we make it a good time. And we play games and we play soccer in some like hallway corner, and I sit in very dirty places and we play games and we talk about what's going on and we make it a good and exciting place. So I go to check on my patients at the end of the day, and I go to visit this young man, and he's a teenager, probably about 15, and he's crying, and I think, uh-oh, like crying is usually like, call child life, someone's having an emotional experience, so they probably need something. So I think, is he in pain? I would be surprised if he is, because they give him pain medication, and I was like, is he not happy with it? Sometimes patients don't really understand that the way it looks right after surgery, especially if you haven't had many healthcare experiences, is not how it's going to look like 2 weeks from then. Like it's puffy and it has stitches and those will come out and it will look different. And so I'm kind of wondering like, what's going on? And he didn't have any parents around. And so I sent my translator and I said, can you ask him what's wrong? Can you ask him why he's crying? And he said, and she was like, oh, don't worry, he's not in pain. He's crying because he's happy. And he's crying because he said, now someone will marry me. And it was just this moment where I was like, I knew it would be hard to live your life that way, but for 15 years of his life, that had been something he worried about. Will anyone see past this thing that I couldn't change, I couldn't control, I was just born this way. There's nothing I can do about it. And can anyone see past that to want to be with me and to want me for the person that I am? And so you get these wonderful, beautiful opportunities that take you deep into people's lives, and you get to share those moments with them. Sometimes they're their hardest moments, and sometimes they're beautiful moments, but they're often moments where people realize their own strength and their own abilities. And for me, it's one of those moments when you go, you know what? It took just a couple doctors, a couple people coming together, some people donating stuff, and we get to go and we get to change someone's life that way. So one of the great things in my life is, looking for ways to serve and to help other people. There's so many opportunities in the world and so many needs out there that anywhere you look, you can find them. So you learn to deal with things that are beyond your control. You learn to have to deal with, we're all going to have our stuff, is the phrase we use in our house. Everyone has their stuff. Everyone will have their hards. Sooner or later in your life, there's going to be things that you didn't want to have, and they happen, or things that you kind of fear, and then that's it, and you don't really have a choice in it. But the other thing that I love about being a child life specialist is you are the fun person. So your job in the hospital, you never give a shot, you never make someone take their medicine, you never do anything painful, you bring the party. You make everything better. And that became one of the ways that I wanted to live my life, not just in the hospital, but everywhere. Like if I am at a dinner party, I'm like, this is the party table, because we can be ordinary or we can be really fun. If we're going on a trip, I'm like, I'm bringing 6 dozen homemade cookies for the people I don't even know that I'm meeting in this foreign country, and I'm going to sew you scrub hats so that you look really fun, because you may be the person scrubbing the floor with formaldehyde in India, but you're part of the team that makes it happen for us. And there's a way that we can make that more meaningful instead of ordinary. So my job is to get up every day and be like, I want today to be really fun. It could be ordinary, but I can do things to make it more meaningful and more fun. And that's what I love about child life. So, and because I am all of these things, but the other thing I am is a teacher. And I love teaching. And I don't think of teachers as like, I have this wisdom and power, and you are like little students, and you should learn from my greatness. No, that is not what teaching is about at all. And anyone who's a great teacher will tell you this. Teaching is about opening doors for people. Teaching is about helping you see and learn and understand things. The greatest gifts we can give people are knowledge. The greatest gifts we can give people are opportunities. I mean, I'm standing up here today and I am just giving you words. I'm giving you ideas. Hopefully, just maybe, for a few of you, I'll give you some good idea that will stick with you or that will help you in some way. And by the way, you're welcome to tell me any of those things on the bottom of most of the slides. I put my website, so you can always shoot me a message on there. Twitter, Instagram, you can find me in the world. But anyways, when we empower people, when we give them opportunities, when we give them knowledge, they get to grow, and it's fantastic. And learning is a really individual experience. Like you may think, I go to a class, and my teacher gets up there and they say the same thing to everyone. So really, aren't we all learning the same thing? But you aren't. Everyone learns things in really individual and distinct and unique ways. That's what's cool about life, because what you bring to the table is something totally different than the person next to you brings from the table. Because you had a different home life, you've had different jobs, you've had different experiences, so learning is deeply unique and individual. So I embrace that. We all learn in different ways, and the way that our thoughts and our experiences shape the rest of our life is so cool. So we also have the power to influence other people in real, personal ways. There's a piece of art I'll show you later. It's this red branch painting, and for me that piece explores the way that you interact with someone else, and you have communication, you have a conversation, they say something to you, and in that exchange, your life becomes different. Your life becomes different because of the people you know. We all sort of bump into each other every day in different ways, and not physically bump into each other, although that happens too. but we bump into one another in our conversations and our actions. And we can determine the sort of energy and the things that we communicate to other people as we bump into them in a day. And my goal is always to bump into people in good ways, to leave you better than I found you, to leave you thinking, hey, I can make life more fun and I can do more than I thought I could. So, influencing other people and sharing what you know. Everyone can be a teacher. Everyone should be a teacher because there's things that you know or that you've experienced, good, bad, or other, that you can use to help other people. And you don't have to be a professional teacher and you don't have to lecture in front of a big group to do this. Your stories are as important as my stories, and you can use them to help other people. So this is one of the ideas that shaped my life. This is just from a novel that was by George Eliot, and in her novel, Daniel Deronda, there's this character named Gwendolyn Harleth, and she has kind of gone through this sort of difficult experience in her life, and she kind of has to resolve to move forward in a way from this point. And she says that I may live to be one of the best women who makes others glad that they were born. So she doesn't say, I want people to be glad I was born. She says, I want to make it so other people are glad they were born, that they can find meaning in their experience and in their lives. There is a wonderful article that I hope you all will go and read, and we could talk about it for hours, but it's called This Is Your Life and How You Tell It. And it was written by Benedict Carey. It was in the New York Times in about 2007. And it's a really great article because it talks about the way in which we often view our lives as present, and we often view our lives in a future context. But one of the most important things is actually how we think about our past. I've told you stories from my past today, but those stories would just be stories unless I went back and made meaning from them and connected them with these sort of threads to the present tense of my life. And so in the way that as we look for our lives, as we look for stories, as we look to see our lives as sort of journeys along the way, like a typical story where the person goes out and they encounter all these trials and obstacles, and in the end, they achieve this great thing. That's actually how most of our lives go. But as you look at your life in this lens, you see so much more meaning and so much more power in your past and in your experiences to shape your future in a successful way. So I would encourage you to read that and to sort of think of your life that way. What are the lessons? What are the stories that you've already learned? What are those volumes you're putting on your shelf already? And how do you make them even more amazing? I also want you to look, here you are, you're in school, you go to class. Sometimes it may feel like you're just doing assignments. Sometimes you may think, I don't really know what I'm learning from this. It kind of doesn't really excite me, or this is not my favorite subject. But really, I could have done what I did with child life or teaching or art with any subject. I could have done it with mechanical engineering with my husband or anything. But as you learn things, look for the bigger lessons it's teaching you in life. It's not just in homework or little assignments, but they're those deeper things that it teaches you, that it trains you to do in the ways that it helps you to think. And really to embrace that multiplicity of your talents and abilities. Don't think you have to lock things up in a cage and think, you know what, I've got to pick that one thing. Because we live in a world today where you can do multiple things. I mean, I look at my life now, and the time I graduated from college, a lot of the things that I do now weren't really possible or wouldn't have been possible in the way that they are now, that I can work from home, that I sell paintings to people all over the world I've never met, that people contact me. I can do all of these things because of what we have today, but I couldn't have imagined these jobs because the tools and the technology wasn't there yet. And so you don't know what's out there. More and more things will be out there that you can't even really understand. So if you're sort of keeping up with all these different things that you love and looking for ways to keep them active in your life, you'll find those things that you go, wow, I look at my life and I think, this is so much better than I thought it was going to be. There's days when I get up and I think, I can't believe somebody actually pays me to do this. My kids were the other day, we were talking to someone else about what they want to be when they grow up. My kids were all like, you should be an artist. You can wear your pajamas. you work at home, you can watch movies, you listen to music and eat food the whole time, and someone is paying you to do this. And I think, yeah, it's amazing. Like, I never thought. And I would rather do it than I would rather eat or sleep. My husband will come home at the end of the day sometimes, and I'll be like, I am so hungry for dinner. He's like, well, why are you so hungry? Because all I ate was one thing of yogurt. And he's like, you haven't left the house like all day. And I was like, but I was painting. I couldn't stop. So it's when you do things you love, it empowers you so much. You get up and you are excited for that next day. So finding those things you love, there's so many thousands of things out there. And I hope that you will fill your lives with all of those things, and you'll look for ways to incorporate them. So I want to leave you with a poem that I really love. It's called The Laughing Heart, and it's by Charles Bukowski, who is an American author and poet. And it goes, your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Be on the watch. There are ways out. There's a light somewhere. It may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Be on the watch. The gods will offer you chances. Know them. Take them. You can't beat death, but you can beat death in life sometimes. And the more often you learn to do it, the more light there will be. This life is your life. Know it while you have it. You are marvelous. The gods wait to delight in you. So thank you so much for letting me come and talk to you today. As I said, I may see some of you at the art talks tonight, but I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. Okay, right there. Okay, so for me, if I'm going on a typical mission, I've been on ones where we do 250 in a week, but an average one is probably 100 in a week. So we would probably have 4 to 5 plastic surgeons working at a time. So we'd be doing about 20 surgeries a day. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Over here? That is a great question. I have learned to do things in shifts and seasons. So I kind of have running things that I know are on my calendar. Like every October, like next weekend, I'll be in New York presenting at a conference. And I know every year I will be presenting at that conference in New York or California. And so I know that sort of this section of time is blocked off. But and I've been really lucky that a lot of the things I do, I'm able to work from home. And so I love it because I still feel like I'm home doing what I want to all day, and I get to fit all of these projects in sort of on my own time and in my own ways. A lot of it is that I kind of do things like I just finished up a contract writing a class for BYU on psychosocial care of children in hospitals, and so I was like, okay, now I'm getting ready for a really big gallery show in Salt Lake in March. And so you can all come, 15th Street Gallery. I'll be there third Friday in March for, so I get to kind of go through cycles of things where one thing kind of gets more focus or emphasis for a little while, and then sort of it'll move into another project. So it's kind of like the wave of projects that I kind of know, okay, I can't take that on right now. Like someone will say, hey, can you do this? And I'll be like, come back to me in a few months, because I have to like have it. But there very much has to be sort of ebbs and flows of these different timelines. They all intersect, but I somehow have managed to, and they all kind of work together for me too. Like presenting at conferences helps me get my continuing ed, that keeps me current in child life, which lets me do this. And so I've found this cool way that they all work for me. So. Anyone else? I've given you so much wisdom, your brains are so full, I know. Okay, over here. There's a priority system that they do. So the goal is to, of course, treat it as early as possible. So babies have first priority, even though sometimes that's really hard because you have a patient come in. There was a woman in India who, she was 27 and had lived her whole life with an unrepaired cleft lip. And it was most exciting for me when she got to have that surgery done. And she was so excited. And her husband came, and I brought her something after surgery, and she took her wedding earrings off, and she put them in my ears and was like, thank you so much. Like, this is all we have, but we have to give you something. And I was like, I didn't do the surgery, I didn't. But she was like, no, this I waited my whole life to have this happen. But for Operation Smile, there's a priority system. So you start with babies first because then you have the sort of the best trajectory, and then you try to catch up and catch everyone along the way. And the goal is really to go into a country and not make it that they're dependent on you coming to do the surgeries, but we go in and we train people so that it can be self-sustaining in those areas, so they can learn those techniques and then they can do it locally with physicians. And so, but for child life, there's pretty much no child life in other countries. So I'm always the oddity that comes in and is like, hey, have you thought about how children feel when all this is going on? But it's a great thing. So any others? I know you have great things to go on to after this, but thank you so much. And just be an artist.